I was lucky to get in data early on, before data was sexy, before data was cool. It's better when you take an approach of earning the trust and respect of the team you're leading, rather than assuming that because you are in the position, you now have that respect and that trust from the teams. My success is directly proportional to the success of the team. Prioritize the growth of the people and then always be willing to unlearn and relearn new things, right? Every day. After a point in time, it's all about people. The more you listen, the better you're going to be in life. If you prioritize listening for understanding, if you prioritize empathy, your life is going to be so much easier and everybody's going to appreciate you so much more than if you just basically think you know it all. It's the human side of things in terms of execution, delivery, and esteem expectations was going to make you or break you as a data leader.
You're listening to Data Analytics Chat, where data meets career.
Welcome to Data Analytics Chat, the podcast where we discuss the world of data, AI, and the careers shaping it. My guest today is Juan Gorricho, a leader who's embraced change, led global teams for leading companies, including Walt Disney, Visa, TD, and now the founder of Strategic Data Transformation. Juan has led teams, driven transformation, and picked up some great lessons along the way. So in today's episode, we'll explore his journey, the challenges, and insights he has for anyone looking to grow their own career. And also the data topic, we'll look at how hard it is to get things done in data projects. Juan, welcome.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. And I appreciate you having me.
No problem, my pleasure. And you've had a fascinating career. So I'm looking forward to sharing your story. So do you want to start? Just introduce yourself, give yourself a bit of a background.
Yeah, sounds good. So Juan Gorricho, I'm originally from Colombia. Been living in the US for about 25 plus years. My whole career, like 25 plus, almost 28 years, has now been in data. I was lucky to get in data early on, before data was sexy, before data was cool. And so I've been very lucky and very happy along this journey. Undergrad degree in industrial engineering, although I never worked as an industrial engineer, so don't ask me any questions about that. And then I have a master's degree, an MBA from University of Virginia in Charlottesville. But so effectively, my whole career has been, as I mentioned, working in data, usually at the intersection of sort of what I call data, technology, and business. Like I sit at that intersection in which I can understand business problems, understand how data and tech can be brought to solve the business problems. And it's been a fascinating journey. To your point, as part of the intro, I've been lucky to be part of companies such as Disney, Visa, TD Bank, and many others in which I've been able to work in some really cool and also some, lesson learning projects. So very happy to be here and thank you for having me again.
Really? So I guess what first drew you into the field? Obviously, like you said, it's sexy now. Everyone wants to get in there. So I guess what first drew you into the industry? Yeah,
so I think I've been I was lucky growing up in that my dad early on gave us access to computers at home. And so playing with computers, I had a chance to play with like early versions of Excel or even Lotus 1, 2, 3. You may be too young to know what that is, but it's basically Excel's predecessor. So with that and other programs, I always fascinated how you can structure data and then you can analyze it, you can summarize it, you can play with data. And so that's what got me interested in data. While I was in college, there was a couple of courses that also showed me how through databases, again, you can store data, you can track things, and you can sort of take businesses and represent them in data. And so that became a fascination throughout college that led me to an internship, and my first internship, and it was just working on data, just doing data work and running SaaS processes to actually analyze data and do analytics and statistics. And I just became fascinated with the idea of being able to use data to answer business questions and to drive business value. And that came into a lot of pain points of also understanding how data sometimes misrepresents the business or the data quality gaps. But it was, again, this notion of I can understand businesses through data. Business can be represented in data, and there's a lot of opportunity to help organizations use data. I've been lucky to apply that in the private sector, with the companies I mentioned. I also have had the chance to work in data in nonprofits and some charities, both in Colombia and the US. And it's the same thing. Like you can always take data and make an impact or have an impact really. That's really what's has driven me in my career to be where I am and to be got into the industry in the first place.
Did you always want to get into data, or was it comfort? Did you want to be a sports athlete, or?
I think so. What I wanted to do was to basically use data, right? And build databases and answer questions through data, right? And I've always have this bent towards using data for business purpose, right? And so that's probably the reason, because at some point in my career, or even in college, I had a chance to maybe go down the computer science path or information technology path. But to me, that was too technical. It was more on if you have good data and you are able to analyze the data and structure data, then you can answer all these questions for the business and you can make the business most effective. And that's really what has been very attractive to me throughout my career, right? Even now, that's what I'm thinking about is how can I continuously help organizations use data to add business value? And so to me, if I look at my career, I've been kind of industry agnostic. Like I've been in probably more than 6 to 8 different industries. I've switched industries. So it's more than a specific industry or a business. It's that ability to say, I want to be able to use data for answering business questions. And that's really what drove me into it and what has gotten me more specialized in data. There's been points in my career in which I've had chances to work on different paths or sort of a little bit more distant than data teams or data work. But I always end up coming back to the data space one way or another because, again, that passion for using data to have a business impact.
Yeah, no, and I think it's becoming even more important to understand data from a domain, doesn't it? Because obviously now we're blessed. There's so many technologies out there that can do coding, heavy lifting for us. I think if you can actually understand data for business, what the impact is, you're going to actually be able to provide the insights to the company at a higher level.
But yeah, exactly. You're spot on. Exactly. And I think that's, and obviously that's to me what I've learned throughout my career, again, 20, probably 8 years or something of doing this, is exactly that, is that to me sometimes is the key difference between success and failure in data projects and data work are you strategically aligned to your style what you're doing, or are you just doing a tech project for the sake of doing a tech project? And that, to the extent you are one side or the other, what makes a difference. And in my experience, data teams that I've seen succeed are teams that are very aligned with the business, that truly understand what the business is trying to accomplish and are very well in tuned and, again, aligned with how the business is thinking about their objectives. Whereas on the other hand, the teams that are more disconnected from that objective is usually teams that struggle to deliver value and that actually ended up being sort of cataloged as probably failures.
Yeah, I think it's big. I think a big challenge for businesses is that getting that right balance of actually understanding business and the tech data side. There's always the balancing, isn't there?
Yeah, agreed. Exactly, 100%, 100%. And so delivering the data space is a notion of sort of people, process, technology, and data. So you do need technology, but you also need processes and people, right? And it's finding that balance between, as you said, between the tech aspects of it and the business aspect of it. I tend to say, and I know this probably, something that sometimes can be in trouble with my peers who are technology oriented, is that for the most part, tech is usually the easy part of data work, right? There's plenty of tech solutions. There's plenty of solving tech problems is a very well structured situation. Is usually on. So I call that the how and the what. Why are you using that technology to solve a business problem? What problem are you solving from? That's usually where the gaps are. And that's hard, right? Because that requires data leaders to listen openly to the business, to have empathy, right? To be able to understand the business and to be able to be in the business to understand what objectives am I going to be enabling through data? How is the company going to be different? How is the process going to be different? How is growth going to be different or retention, whatever the objective is? That's usually something that it's hard for some data leaders, particularly if you end up taking a very heavy tech view to data. And so that comes back to how close are you aligned with the business, and are you able to bridge that gap and build those relationships with the business?
Let me just pause this for us.
Hey, Ben?
Can you still hear me, Duran?
Ben?
Yeah, so the signals.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can edit this out. It's just the signal keeps cutting out. I just don't know if it's my end or your end.
I think it's me. I've been having a little bit of issues with my connection recently.
Oh, it's just reconnecting, man. I've just got, I don't know.
I think my connection is giving me grief again. Now it's back. Now it's back, I think.
Okay, can you hear? Yeah.
I can hear you. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah. I'm just recording all the time, just to remember it. Right, that's cool. I'll jump into the next question. We can edit that out, so that's fine.
Sounds good.
Okay. So looking back, has there been a defining moment when you realised this industry it was the right choice for yourself?
Yeah, I was thinking about this question, and I think that I think there's been multiple moments. I would say in which I have confirmed that this was the right field to be in, and I think usually coincides with sort of all this hype cycle, right? Because like if you think about the AI hype cycle we're in right now, there's been plenty of those cycles throughout my career, at least, right? You had early on, you had this course about data warehouses, right? And then parallel MPPs, like parallel databases, right? And then you had big data, and then you had like, all this BI stuff, and then machine learning, right? So every now and then there's a new trend that sort of drives that hype cycle. But each of those inflection points, or whenever that happens, having been able to help companies make good progress in data through those cycles is something that's confirmed. Like, yeah, this is definitely the space I wanted to be in, and I'm happy I chose to stay in this space. And for as long as I've been, just being able to help sort of demystify or bring some set of reality to, there's all this hype about the things, but really it comes down to, again, what outcomes are you enabling? What business outcomes are you enabling through data? And you can do that with the hype element or not. You can do it with AI or machine learning, or you can just enable value, period, right? And so the hype cycles have been useful in bringing attention to what's going on and the opportunities, but also have been a good chance for me to show what value can be brought with data and through data. So yes, I think there's been plenty of times, and I was reflecting on this, and there hasn't been any time that I said, man, I chose the wrong business or I chose the wrong field to be in. I'm very happy to be in this space, and I'm glad I got in as early as I did.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's obviously when you go through these, like you said, the hype periods, these big changes. I mean, if you're interested in tech, it's exciting, isn't it? Because it's that change, it's the improvements, the impact that can be made for companies.
Yeah, exactly. I think that, and I think so. So it is exciting. I think that sometimes, and especially lately with AI and all this stuff, there's also a lot of risk in that. There's some, I would say, that's done, especially because those hype cycles tend to inflate expectations, right? I think they tend to increase expectations much more rapidly than the ability of data teams to deliver. So, but at the same time, then sort of puts you as a data leader in a position in which you need to do a lot of education, you need to do a lot of sort of storytelling about the reality between the hype, or what's the gap between the hype and reality, what can be done, what should be done, how should it be done. And it's a challenge, but it's an opportunity. And my concern lately has been that because AI is seemingly so easy to use, right? Anyone can feel like they're doing vibe coding with GPT or Claude or whatever, right? And so it is so easy, right? And so it's tangible. I can touch it, I can see it, right? That is inflating expectations to a point that it's putting a lot of pressure on data teams, especially when we know that the infrastructure may not be there, that the data foundation is not there. And that's, again, it's a challenge. I see it as an opportunity, right? And in that notion, you have to do a lot of education, a lot of hopefully proactive education with the boards, right? With the C-level, and it's like, yeah, this all sounds great, but let me show you where we are, your capabilities, what can we do, right? And how should we do it to avoid or to avoid many of the risks that this brings if you do it the right way, right? Thankfully, there's plenty of examples of companies have jumped with both feet into their hype cycle early on, right? At the bleeding edge of adoption, and they've been burned badly because of privacy issues or security issues, or sorts of things, right? So you can use those examples as a way to educate your key stakeholders.
Yeah, no, I think you agree. Like, especially when something big happens, like so generative AI, like the expectation then is sky high. So you've got to balance that with where people are at. I guess it's similar. Like if you have a sports team that overachieves one year, maybe wins a cup or championship, your expectation is they've got to win it every year now. But obviously, it's not going to happen. So I guess it is challenging.
Exactly,
to manage people, isn't it? Because everyone's. I think also like another example is like I think like in the early days when the iPhone come out, like it's not amazing, and the features, if they're not as high your expectations again, it's hard to balance them, isn't it? Because you expect every time something massive to happen.
Yes, exactly. No, exactly. And yes, and you see lately how the new features, your point on the iPhone, are seemingly cosmetic to an extent, right? To an extent. But expectations management is probably one of the big things that any data leader should be able to be really good at. And that comes with influencing, with like being able to talk to the business, with the business, to educate, right? To bring a dose of reality, to don't let the pressure put you in a position in which you will be set up for failure. I honestly think that if you look at the CDO's tenure, the chief data officer's tenures, I think on average is like 18 to 24 months, right? And I think to a great degree, that comes down to this gap between expectations and ability to deliver and not managing those expectations appropriately.
And then we also have social media to deal with, where we've got things to influence as well. So, obviously it's a challenge for leaders. I guess it's part of business, isn't it?
Exactly.
Was there ever failure is a strong word, or a learning that turned out to be a really important lesson for you?
Yeah, I think so. There's been plenty, right? I think that anyone who tells you that they haven't failed is probably lying to you, right? And or they're not aiming high enough, right? I had a great boss who used to say that if you're skiing and you're not falling, then you're not really aiming to be better skier or something along those lines. I think that probably one of the big lessons from my career, and it happened early on, is sort of this notion that when you become a leader and managing teams of people, a lot of magic will happen because of the authority, because now you're in the position of authority. And that's, it depends on your approach to leadership. That can be true to an extent. But the big lesson for me was it's better when you take an approach of earning the trust and respect of the team you're leading, rather than assuming that because you are in the position, you now have that respect and that trust for the teams. And so it happened early on when I got promoted to managing a small team. And so there were people in that team that had more experience than me. They were older than me. But I think more critically, one of the individuals was actually someone who thought that they should be leading the team and not me. I felt like, okay, I'm the leader now, I'm the manager here. And it was a very challenging few months managing the situation because I hadn't earned the respect of those individuals, particularly this one. And that taught me a lot about how do you listen to your teams, how do you build trust, how do you build respect, how do you earn that respect from your team so that you can become a true leader. And so that, again, the key lesson there is the title is meaningless, the position of authority is meaningless. I had similar situations when I served in the army as well, in which it is not the rank, is more the trust and respect that you earn what really gives you sort of the quote-unquote authority to lead teams. And that has been, let's say that was the failure in terms of not being young and naive and understanding those dynamics. I think if I look at the opposite of the success is in every new situation in which I've been promoted or in which I've been lucky to take on larger scope to manage larger teams, I've applied those principles. Like I'm here, but that doesn't mean that I've earned your respect. I need to earn your trust and earn to respect. And I do that through a lot of the principles of empathy, of listening, of working with the teams to show them that, yes, I'm the leader and I'm ultimately the last person accountable for the outcomes of the team, but also that we're a team and that I'm here to help the team succeed. And my success is directly proportional to the success of the team. So those two, in like the failure and how I frame that as a positive going forward, since that point in time, early in my career, that's been one of the defining sort of leadership lessons or even life lessons for me.
Yeah, no, I think it's also, communication skills is critical, isn't it? It's so important, like just the way you portray things. Like you said, to be successful, everyone needs to be put in a shift and everyone brings different skill sets to the table. So qualities or skills have made the biggest difference for you stepping into leadership?
Yeah, I think that sort of related to the prior question and reflecting on this, I think to me it comes down to I'm a big fan of servant leadership principles. And I mean that not just or how you run teams and manage teams, but also how you interact with stakeholders in a business setting. And there's three core principles that I recently highlight from the servant leadership principles. One is listening, being able to listen first to understand. I've been accused many times to be a very quiet leader that is more sort of passive, but that's because I prioritize listening over speaking. I think the second key skill is empathy. I just compassionate empathy. Like try to understand where the other is coming from, what the framework of reference is, what they mean when they say something. And then the third one is commitment to the growth of people, right? And I think, again, I think these three things can be applied easily to teams, very importantly to your teams. And that's why I was referring to before in the prior, when we were talking about the prior question, was about like my success in life as a leader is my team growing? Are the individuals developing? Are they better off when I came after I left? Are they better off? Did they grow? And that many times can mean that with my team or without my team. So part of listening also means understand what drives them. And there's been plenty of conversations I've had with people in my teams that they didn't want to be part of the team once I came. They felt we were not aligned, or they wanted to do something different. But being able to have the trust to have that conversation through listening and empathy allowed me to help them find different roles for them to grow, right? And then finally, there's the fourth element I would highlight is sort of this, I call it intellectual curiosity, or sort of your desire to learn, and relearn, right? I think that's something that I definitely, when I build teams or when I manage teams, is something that I usually tend to look for, to hire for, because like if you think about the data space or any space, but especially data, is changing so fast and is moving so fast that what you know today is going to be useless like a month from now, right? And so having that curiosity to always wanting to learn more, unlearn what you know, be able to break with your mental models and learn new things is crucial for success. So I would say those four elements is what sort of are the key things that have made a difference, at least in my experience, leading teams.
Yeah, I think like a lot of business, I think, especially like hiring, a lot of people are just looking for this skill set, like tech skill set, when I think you would need to, obviously it's a hard one to test as well, isn't it, to get people whether they're going to grow into the role, but you need to understand, again, with the way things are going now, is I guess having people, individuals that got that ability and willingness to learn, because yeah, things are moving so quick now. Even like when I was doing hiring like 10 years ago, the amount of people we speak to were quite rigid in their ways. But I think now, the last couple of years, it's just, you've got to keep evolving now. It's just the way it is.
100%, right? 100%. Like, as I mentioned, when I started my career, right, SaaS was the big thing, right? And everything was SaaS. As nowadays, right, like, you ask the younger people, like they barely can spell SaaS, right? And so, and for a lot of people in the middle, that require on learning technology and learning new things and new way of doing things. And to your point, exactly, that's usually what makes a difference. And so that's something when I mentor people, some people that I'm lucky to be able to mentor them younger in their careers or some experienced executives, is that listen, have empathy, right? Prioritize the growth of the people, and then always be willing to unlearn and relearn new things, right? Every day, right? Because things are changing too quickly, and what you know today is not what's going to be the difference tomorrow.
Yeah. And I would say you've got people that will talk the talk, but then you also need to get people that will walk the walk as well, because it's easier saying than doing, isn't it? Like, I think everyone's probably been through this. You need to just stick to your word, don't you?
Exactly. And you mentioned that, it's hard to measure, right? It's hard to assess, and this is where you're going to make hiring mistakes, right? And you're going to discover that people will know what they're telling you, right? But yes, absolutely. You have to make sure they are able to walk the talk and are able to do that, right? And that usually is what makes a difference into like someone who can grow into a role successfully versus someone which is basically stuck to their own ways.
So has it been a big influence in has technology been a big influence in your career?
Yeah, I think definitely technology. As I mentioned, I was very lucky early in my career that my dad gave us and my siblings access to computers early on, right? I remember coding in an Apple IIe in a language, in a program called Logo, right? Which was like this early sort of drawing program. And so that and not only the access, but my dad is someone who's incredibly curious intellectually and with technology. And so he's instilled that in us, me and my siblings, in that how technology is an amazing enabler if used the right way and for the right purpose. I think also there's been great leaders that I've had the privilege and luck to work with, right? And that's something that has actually made a difference in my roles. And I've learned from a handful of amazing leaders that I would follow anywhere. A lot of these things that I've talked about, like empathy and caring for the teams and the human side of leadership, the people side of leadership and the people side of business. Similarly, I've been lucky that I haven't had that many sort of, let's say, bad experiences with leaders, but there's been situations in which there was no alignment with leaders, right? We wouldn't see eye to eye. And that also taught me a lot of what I was not willing to compromise, right? How my principles were important, and that, in some of the situations, I decided to move on, right? Because I clearly didn't feel I was in a situation that was aligned with my principles from a leadership perspective. But yes, definitely, I think the people, the leaders I've had the chance to work with have been amazing. Some of them have been amazing, have taught me a lot of things about the human side of leadership. Like it's very interesting. When I was in business school and I was sort of networking, this was 25 years ago. And you tend to be like, you're young, so you're very focused on the technical aspects of your business degree, right? Like, finance and this and that, right? And every alumni I would talk to through networking, they would say, listen, after a point in time, that's great. And the technical or the functional experience is great. But after a point in time, it's all about people. Like, yeah, you're going to find yourself managing work through people, managing people, influencing people. So it's all about people. And then you hear that, so yeah, but I still want to take some of these technical sort of classes and then lo and behold, right, the moment you get into leadership and you start growing your career, it's all about people, right? It's managing teams, dealing with people, dealing with humans, right? Dealing with stakeholders, right? Influencing. And so definitely, I think that's why I value a lot the lessons that some of the key people in my life have been.
Yeah, I think it's quite easy, especially in early in your career, because you're not looking at leaders in that way. It's more about learning your trade, isn't it? I think you overlook the leaders the bosses you've had in your career, because if you look back now, you probably think, actually, yeah, I like that about X, I like that about Y. I think you pay attention to it, don't you?
Exactly. You pay a lot of, exactly. You're spot on. And something that I was thinking about recently, and that Simon Sinek actually, he has a really good article about it, or a post or something like that. You would like sometimes when you like, if you don't have the leader that you wish you had, then become the leader you wish you had. And to your point, I think that's something that situations in the past sort of led me to that. And what I went back and did is I sort of listed on the leaders that were great, right? To me, what did they do great from my perspective? And then what should I do to be, and it's incredibly helpful, right? Because it sort of shows you what your principles are, like what's good, right? And it starts like sort of making sure that you're driving towards those kind of success as a leader.
No, definitely. So let's say a lot of people have a fear to move into leadership for not thinking they know enough or wanting to know more. What sort of advice would you offer someone who wants to sort of break into leadership? I think
that this is a great question, right? And I do get it a few times. As I mentioned, I mentor a few people, and so I think that the first thing is that usually when you're getting into leadership, you're going to be at this inflection point in which you were usually, let's say, hands-on. You were more maybe individual contributor, or more like leading a smaller teams, or was heavily hands-on. But the more you become into leadership, the less hands-on you're going to be. Right? And I think it's really important to recognize that and understand that, because that's the realization of whatever brought you here is not going to make you successful in the future. And that also is a key point to understand. You now need to lead and get things done through people. So letting go of the hands-on aspect of it and being able to then manage people in terms of setting goals, setting expectations, following up on those expectations, those goals, giving feedback, giving proactive feedback or constructive feedback is something that leaders need to be able to recognize. And I think so being able to let go of that desire to get things done yourself, hands-on, versus leading to people is one of the critical pieces of advice I give people. And when I see new leaders fail is usually when they can't resist the sort of the pull to get things done, because whoever they are leading are doing things differently, and they jump in and get it done, right? That's one of the big things, is that you need to let go of the how. You need to agree on the what and the why. But that's the big thing, is it's really as you grow in leadership and you're managing larger teams, like one of the teams I've led 120 people, right? There's no way in life that I can ever know what the 120 are doing. Even if I wanted to, I wouldn't have the time of the day, right, to do that. So I need to learn to trust, to make sure that I'm clearly communicating, that I'm setting expectations, that I'm measuring the outcomes, and then empowering the different layers of leaders underneath me to be able to do the same way, and empower decision-making, delegating. Because I think there's definitely the larger the team, or the larger your scope, the less intelligent you're about the details, but then the more intelligent you need to be about people management and expectations management. So I think that's one thing I would tell people. And the second thing is definitely, as I mentioned before, the key principles of servant leadership, right? Empathy, listening, prioritize the growth of your teams, right? That's something that's going to carry you a long way. And there's different styles of leadership, right? Some people are different. They may not agree with the servant leadership principles. I'm a big fan of them. They've served me well. And I think definitely that's something I would say. The more you listen, the better you're going to be in life. If you prioritize listening for understanding, if you prioritize empathy, your life is going to be so much easier and everybody's going to appreciate you so much more than if you just basically think you know it all and always lead with talking and directing. Of course, context matters and situations sometimes require you to be much more prescriptive and directive. But for the most part, listening and empathy are something that's going to carry you a long way.
No, that's some great advice. Okay, cool. We'll move on to the data topic then. And obviously, yeah, I guess the goalposts are always constantly changing with data projects. It's a massive challenge for firms. So why would you say so many data projects that look promising on paper struggle to deliver real business value?
I think to me, the key to this is the lack of business alignment. Are we able to answer the question like, why are we doing this? As you and I sort of talked about this a few minutes ago, is like technical competency is important. Like, knowing how to get things done is important. Doing it the right from a technology perspective is important. But usually to me, the gap, and it's happened to me many times in projects have failed, is that there was no clear understanding of why are we doing this? How is the business going to benefit from this? Do we really understand how they need to use this solution or adopt the solution? And are we doing the right sort of change management and adoption management and training with the business? And so that's basically to your point, like, something paper, like a new predictive model to do something may look fantastic, right? But if there's no clear why, there's no clear adoption, there's no clear adoption plan, adoption strategy, then it's usually that what leads into failure, because that usually business teams and the data teams are separate. And if the business team, the data team see it as I'm just producing outputs that hopefully someone will use, that's the key break in expectation management and alignment that makes really PowerPoint with projects not come to realize their full value, full potential.
Yeah, no, I think also there's a lot goes into it, isn't it? Like the goalposts constantly change. I mean, again, it's just saying and doing, isn't it? Like what you're dealing with people, change management, you've got the processes. I think that's the biggest thing, isn't it? When you change it, is like processes. Like it's just because as soon as you change one thing, obviously more opportunity, but there's also more challenges. Like everything keeps moving.
Exactly. No, you're exactly right. There's one example in my career, in Disney, like we were launching this amazing project to redo a process completely. So this was a process that had some analytical components in it. We redid the analytical platform, thinking that, hey, we're just redoing the analytical engine that is producing these outputs that the park operators need to use to run the parks or the attractions of the parks in Disney. There's no need to talk to them. There's no need, it's just a technology project from a data perspective. And lo and behold, right, what happened was the outcomes changed, right? And that the new analytical engine was producing were more accurate outcomes in terms of projecting and predicting some key drivers, but they were different. And so when you have these operators of the parks who are have a very fine-tuned gut in terms of what they need to run the business, and all of a sudden start getting different numbers, this is crazy. System's broken. I'm going to override it. I'm going to use my own numbers from my experience for 25 years of running this park attraction. And it all came down to we didn't have the change management. We didn't explain to them how this was going to be better. Why is this amazing, beautiful new model that was completely based on some early machine learning elements was going to be better and do things in a different way? And so that's an example of missing the point and missing the talking to the leaders.
Okay. Moving on to the next question then. So do you find the bigger roadblocks in data projects come from typical issues with the data, or is it more from the human cultural challenges?
This is a tough one because I would say it's a little bit of both, but I think generally, to me, the bigger obstacles are the bigger roadblocks are definitely human and cultural, right? Of course, the data itself presents challenges, right, and issues, but usually is the sort of people and process side of things goes back to something we talked about in terms of change management, expectations management, that but it's usually what is the biggest roadblock. They used to do a survey, a CDO survey. I don't know if they do it anymore, but they used to do a survey. They did it for many years. Like the top question was like, what is the biggest obstacle? Change management, process management. The top 20 reasons for challenges, the top 5 had nothing to do with technology. I think Randy Bean does a similar survey, and it usually comes down to change management, people management, process enablement, process improvement, right? So definitely that. I do think that once you overcome those or you make progress on those, many times data is a challenge, right? And that's when sort of data governance, data quality comes into play, misaligned expectations, right? And also misaligned understanding and agreement of who owns data and who should be driving data changes. But if you ask me to choose one, it's definitely human, cultural, and process-centric. Those are the biggest barriers.
Yeah, I think also we touched on it earlier, wasn't it? Like expectation. Like if you deliver one project like amazingly well, I guess your expectation is it's going to run smoothly again. Well, from your boss, your peers, it's going to run smoothly again. But then obviously, like I say, every journey is going to be a different situation.
100%. And I think to that regard, you just made me try to think about something that is very important. I'm a big fan of pilots and POCs, but sometimes pilots set even more inflated expectations, right? Because they make it seem as something that is very easy, and is not sustainable, right? And that's why a lot of the vendors that have approached me in my different corporate roles is like, yeah, we can do a pilot of this, we can do a pilot of that. I said, great. But to do that, you have to make the pilot work or the POC work in the context of my organization, which will test not only the tech aspect of things, but also like procurement and cybersecurity and all these things that matter when you do what you do. Otherwise, you're just doing a shiny object that's got the right expectations that's not going to scale or it's going to fail. And then it sort of continues to damage your reputation and your ability to deliver in the future.
Yeah, and I like you mentioned that because it's similar with the hype with generative AI, because anyone can create, obviously, people can create an easy demo to make it look workable. But then when you put it into a business context where it's got to be scalable to a global company, obviously that's when it's going to be challenges.
Exactly. 100%. And to your point, Gen AI is making even that even harder because, anyone can take that and make it seem beautiful. But then once you start feeding either real data or you start actually like trying to scale it, right? Then that becomes a bigger challenge.
Perfect. So, we're looking at expectations, obviously, between like executives, data teams, and end users. I mean, how does this misalignment sometimes? How's that derail progress?
I think as we mentioned a few times, right? Definitely, I think that the misaligned expectations derail progress because what business teams or the leaders from board of directors or C-level are expecting, there's all this external pressure that it sort of continues to inflate these expectations, right? Like I'm sure that the boards of directors and some of C-level people are experiencing a lot of FOMO, right? Like fear of missing out, right? And so that puts pressure on. So they put pressure on leadership to like, I want to do AI. Like, great. For what purpose, right? And so definitely derails progress because resources that can be or should be used to advance the foundation that is needed to do data the right way get directed to some of these short-term POCs and pilots and projects that are aimed at sort of satisfying the pressure that the board or so C-level executives are putting, but they are not sustainable, right? And because they are not sustainable and end up creating more problems than fixing solutions or fixing problems, then they continue to add up to the bad reputation of the data teams or the executives leading that type of work. So I think it goes back to something we mentioned at the beginning in terms of managing expectations through education, through training is incredibly important to make sure that all this sounds great, right? But to get it done, there's a lot of things you need to get right so that you can make the right progress. You need the right data, you need security, you need all these things. And that sounds cumbersome and sounds like, like a lot of bureaucracy, but it's incredibly important to get it right. And as I mentioned before, right, I think because Gen AI is making it so easy or seemingly so easy to get things done, that's increasing the pressure on teams and people and definitely creating a wider gap between ability to deliver and expectations.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's a lot of hype around like generative AI can do everything when it's not the case. It's like there's still a massive human element needed to deliver these projects, and I think things do get overhyped sometimes. Yeah, and what do you think about speed it's soft and hard to achieve in data projects compared to other business initiatives?
Well, what I've seen in this regard is usually something that has to do with how the projects are executed. And so, for example, in one of my experiences, when I came on board, the approach was, hey, we're going to build this amazing data lake. We're going to fill it with all the data that we have across the company, right? And we're going to be counting how much data we're loading, but there was no sense of what to do with that data, right? It's kind of like the classic build it and they will come approach, right? And so that I consider that a very sort of tech-oriented view to data, or a very sort of left-to-right view to data. It's just build this amazing foundation, make all data AI ready, and then eventually magical things will happen. That slows progress, because progress defined as business outcomes is at zero for a long time, right? Like if you take 3 years or 5 years to build this beautiful data lake, in those 3 to 5 years, the business is basically seeing nothing. So from that perspective, progress is slow, right? Or even zero. I think that you're better off usually by taking a much more sort of iterative approach, and an iterative approach to delivery that is heavily focused on business outcomes. It goes back to the point we've talked about before in terms of how do I identify those business outcomes? How do I make sure that I know what is important for the business? And then very very quickly, in quick iterations, start delivering those outcomes in a way that the business can use it and drive value through that. And then you really just need to build like a fractured process that repeats that over and over and over, right? That's what usually will bring the agility or the agile principles in data. But definitely, as I mentioned, it slows down when you take too much of an extreme approach, right? Because on the other hand, if you do too much to the business too quickly in a way that is not sustainable and not scalable, at some point that machine is going to break, right? And you're going to have this massive amount of solutions all over the place, all silos, all point solutions that they're going to become unsustainable and unmaintainable, and that will bring progress to a halt again, because eventually you're going to say, hold, stop, I can't produce anymore. I need to run these things that I've been producing, so progress is going to slow again. It's finding that application of true agile principles, like lowercase agile, be iterative, be customer driven, make it in a way that is sustainable and scalable, and just do that over and over. There's plenty of low-hanging fruit to do that, right? I think data teams underestimate the importance of just talking to the business and identify the key priorities and just deliver on those in a way that is iterative with MVPs and with but just do it and do it in a way that is scalable and sustainable. That's usually, to me, my experience, what makes this sort of challenge with the speed and agility. That's a way to improve it and make it better.
Yeah, no, and I think it's, again, you touch spot on with dealing with the outcome. Like, what do you want to achieve right now? Because obviously, techies, they want to be doing the exciting projects, but sometimes you're not ready for that. Or even with LLMs at the minute, obviously that tends to be the easy part of the project, but doing all the behind the scenes work, which is less exciting, is the most challenging aspect of the work.
Exactly.
So in your experience, and how often communication breakdowns rather than technical issues cause the real delays?
I think that's really I think the way you phrased it, right? That's the root cause usually, right? And I think that I define breakdown in communication as sort of lack of alignment between data teams and business. And that, yes, usually that's what causes delays, right? In that the project was approached as you will give me all your requirements and I'll go into this black box for the next 9 months and build something to come back. This is that's a clear break in communications, right? Because communication with the business should be something that is ongoing, that is constant. If we go to the prior question and ask, to think about if you're really delivering in an agile way, in a partnership way with the business, then communication is ongoing, and you can tell the business this is working well, this is not working well, we can do this, we cannot do this, right? Or I need your help business prioritizing this over that because we can do this more easily, this is going to take us longer. So that requires ongoing communication. The moment that breaks because how you're approaching the project, or because you don't want to share in full transparency what's going on behind the scenes, or because for whatever reason, that's what's going to basically, to your point, delay the progress. You're going to end up building outcomes or outputs that the business doesn't necessarily need. You're going to be less focused on outcomes, and that's what's going to usually break all things between. So I'm a huge fan of transparency. I'm a huge fan of over communication. and mainly partnership, right? Delivery of data solutions is a partnership between the delivery teams, data teams, tech, and the business. They should be acting as one entity. Like the data teams need to be so embedded and so savvy about the business that they can understand what the business needs. And at the same time, the business teams need to also be savvy about what it takes to get data the right way, right? The business teams need to understand they own data and they are responsible for data. And so that is based on communication, right? Getting to those sort of optimal point of delivery requires constant, ongoing, and transparent communication between the teams.
So would you say, I also noticed there's a lot, like you mentioned, there's a lot of entities that need to be involved with these projects. Is it like not bringing everyone into the meetings, or is it having too slow for meetings? Do you think it's the big problem for businesses, or is it something else?
I think that, so a lot of it could be that you're not involving, but I think what I'm trying to say is that you do have to be careful about how you structure the communication. So it doesn't become then, I think to your point, just meetings for the sake of meetings or many meetings or large meetings, and then that's when I'm a big fan of understanding accountability, very clearly understanding accountability. Who's responsible, who's accountable, who's going to be informed, and who's going to be communicated. And many organizations, right, and I lived through many organizations that like they thrive on consensus, and we are a consensus-based culture, right? That usually euphemism for everybody shows to the meeting, we all get together, but there's no clarity on who's accountable. Like I've been in situations where we try to define accountability, like through a RACI matrix or through whatever tool you want to use, you end up with like two teams being accountable. Like that's not possible. There's only one accountable and one responsible, right? But when you start sort of understanding that and making sure that who really needs to be here, who needs to be informed, that's where you will bring clarity. And the thing is it doesn't mean that you just go dark and you go in a corner and do things on your own with your one partner and that's it. It requires you to have a very well-defined communication strategy to be able to work with all partners and to make sure that all partners understand what's going on and they feel informed and they can chime in if needed. But at the end of the day, there's going to be one responsible party and one accountable party. And if that's clearly identified, then go for it and make it happen. Yes, consensus can be a challenge, but usually when we bring that clarity and accountability, that will help you and drive a lot of the success.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you have so many different levels involved. I have stories of people like just having a meeting to attend a meeting where it's just a waste of time. Like you need to be actually leading with your meetings, don't you, sort of thing. Like, and also, like you got to trust the people involved to do what's going to get delivered because you don't want to. You actually need to deliver, not just keep having these meetings.
Exactly. No, exactly. Like one of my prior roles, right? There was this project we were executing, and there was this like weekly meeting to review progress, right? And 45 people would join the meeting, but like 3 or 4 would speak. And so at some point, like I started measuring this, like, what are we doing? Like these 42 people were joining, what are they? And so I killed the meeting and only added the 4 that need to be there and restricted and blocked the meeting from it being forwarded. And people were up in arms. I need to know, like, no, don't worry about it. We'll communicate them. We'll share minutes, right, of what happened and decisions made. This is and it worked. People just were like 45 people have 1 hour a week to join a meeting to just listen. I would have a bigger problem here because that just makes no sense. Sometimes you have to be like sort of a little bit sort of again active and decisive about that. But don't forget that communication is important, right? And if there was someone in there, why they were here in the meeting in the first place? What did they need to know about this that I can maybe communicate to a minutes meeting, it's email or summary or outcomes or something like that. And so I'd always balance the effectiveness and efficiency of the meetings with your communication strategy to make sure that you still get things done.
I like this because, like I said, you want people, you want to deliver. Like at the end of the day, delivery is important. People don't need to be there sometimes. So as I see, if you got a minute to take in, be efficient, isn't it? Really, it's all about being streamlined.
Exactly. Yes. Exactly.
Cool. So that you could wave a magic wand and remove any one recurring obstacle in data projects, what would it be?
Oh man, there's so many things, but I think I would say the biggest thing is probably lack of trust between the stakeholders of data projects. I think that trust is something you earn, right, by working with your stakeholders and your customers, your business leaders, right, and business teams. I think that because of everything that's happened with data throughout years, I think usually trust is not something that is in a good place at least that's what's happened to me when I've taken over teams or new roles. And so if I could basically remove that with a magic wand, that'll be amazing because it would give me a fresh start. I usually, when I've gone into these situations, I had to earn the trust back of the business team so that we can build the right relationship, the right partnership, so we can deliver. And I think going back to our expectations conversation a few minutes ago, the inflated expectations created by hype is continuing to sort of put more pressure on that importance and value of trust, which is going to make it harder for data teams to earn the trust back, to deliver. And so it just becomes sort of this vicious cycle that you need to break out of. But yeah, definitely many data teams and many data leaders deserve a chance to start fresh, right? And that would mean to me, remove the lack of trust that the business teams may have because of past experiences and give new leaders a chance.
Fascinating. I think it's also quite interesting to hear a lot of these impactful things. It's not on the tech side, is it? At all. It's more on the human side.
That's exactly right. And I think that the successful data leaders that I've been able to work with or have a chance to work with or to know or to talk to, they double down and emphasize that sort of, I think, to your point, human side of things. That's what they focus on. That's what they double down on. The first 90 days, a lot of those days they spend on the humans, getting to know the teams, business stakeholders, right? Know the business stakeholders' business, right? When you prioritize that, your odds of success goes significantly higher. Again, not diminishing the tech side, but tech side is usually the easier side of things, right? It's all well-defined and it's all sort of, you know what a good server looks like. You know what a good database looks like. You can optimize performance, but it's the human side of things in terms of execution, delivery, and stable expectations was going to make you or break you as a data leader.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. And then can you share an example where a data project has overcame the odds and succeeded?
Oh, yeah, there's plenty, right? And I've had my fair share of challenges in my career. And so reflecting on this, I think there's maybe a couple. I think one was at some point during my Disney tenure, working with this team and sort of, again, part of the hype of the machine learning hype back then was we got this request, we need a recommendation engine. Recommendation engines are cool, right? And so a lot of the challenges were sort of start working with the stakeholder, which was the chief customer officer of that line of business that I was working with, to say, well, why? Well, I want to be able to increase sales. I want to increase penetration of my customers. But having a conversation which took a while to understand the why behind we need a recommendation engine is what really sort of allowed us to start overcoming the odds of just saying, here's a ticket for a recommendation engine. A quick way out would be just turn around, do an RFP, build the engine or buy it or model or whatever and just deploy it and check, done. But once we understood why, right, and what was important, then we were able to work in partnership with this executive to say, okay, we'll build the engine, but then we need to embed in a business process. Okay, what business process are we going to choose? Okay, let's choose the call center. Okay. And so I can tell you 80% of the work we had to do was all change manager, train the call center agents to use the recommendation of the engine, right? Have them capture the data, then measure afterwards what happened when the customer was offered the new product, right? And that took months and months of work. The engine itself, the algorithm itself was super simple. V1 was the simplest thing. It was more so of the whole process and change that. And I think because from the beginning of data team, we took the approach of why, what is the business outcome? How do we measure jointly that being basically a successful product in which we prove that the recommendation engine or the improvement of the sales process through the use of analytical recommendation would increase sales by 50%, at least the population would test it. That was a much nicer story to tell the board and the executives than saying, yes, we have an engine, check. And it took a lot of work to earn the trust of businesses to be able to help educate us on the sales process. So we could actually understand where was the best place to embed the engine and the analytical, how to change the process, how to measure the outcomes. And so that's one. I think there's plenty others. I mentioned the one about Disney, which we're improving or replacing an analytical engine or process in which we never talk to the park operators about the outcomes of the new tool. And so that required us to, once we deploy the engine, we had to go back and talk to them, retrain them, do the change management. And so that allowed us to sort of save face and save the project. But I think the difference on those projects or those initiatives was always engage your business stakeholders, always be a partner, understand why things are being done, understand the degree of change management that is needed, and always lead with that. And if you lead with that, you'll know exactly what to do, where to do it, and how to do it. If you just do it for the sake of doing cool analytical projects, cool models, cool predictive models, sure, we can do plenty, but they'll be all theoretical exercises, because I think something that I live by is that any data solution that is not used by the business has zero value. You can have the most elegant predictive model, the most beautiful machine learning algorithm, the most amazing dashboard. If nobody's using the outcomes of of those solutions to drive business value, those solutions are worth zero, regardless of how many millions of dollars you invested in getting them done. And so in able to, ensure this adoption and usage, you have to lead with a business mindset. You have to lead with why are we doing this? How is it going to be used? And how do I get things done? So that's what I would say in the projects that have had challenges or that have faced obstacles. Usually recurring has been always by dealing with the business, work with the business, and just get things done in partnership.
Yeah, I find it fascinating. Some projects can just run so smoothly, and then others you come across, everything goes wrong. It's part and parcel of life, isn't it? It's up and down. I guess it's similar to like if your sports team 1 week, they can actually perform amazing, and then next week it's just, they're completely...
And context matters, right? The field was different, the weather was different, you had some injuries, right? But yeah, context matters, exactly. Context changes, and you have to be able to adjust to the context and do what's the best you can in the new context. Agreed.
Brilliant, Juan. Well, it's been a pleasure having you on, and you provide some great career story and also some great insights on the data side. Yeah, thanks for joining.
On the contrary, Ben, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I hope you and people find it useful.
You've been listening to Data Analytics Chat Podcast. Subscribe to our channel for more stories and insights in data and career.